So the reason why we all kind of came together with this is our executive producer at WCBI, MC Sullivan, I talked with Mark. I believe this was where she talked with me about how you'd mentioned to her that you almost had like a dream about doing in 20 minutes or something like that, or like in one day, 20 videos, something along the line.
It is so funny. It is so funny because when I hear these stories, they bring back so many memories and names. Like when the name Stacey Hester was brought up, I thought, I sat there for like 10 or 15 seconds thinking, I know that name, I know that name, where's that name, who was that? And I'm doing that with all these references. I'm thinking, wow, I haven't thought about that in so long, and I can barely piece it together. Chris is doing such a better job of remembering that, and Will. Of course, now see that the history is Will was working there for the enemy there when WTBA, when I arrived in 1994. Yeah, and then so I don't even think of Will being in the WCBI chain, but fortunately, Will and I in the last few years have been able to connect on social media and keep up with each other. But yeah, I have this reoccurring dream, probably once every couple years, that I am in a editing booth and it's 5:45 and I have nothing done. And then I can't get anything done. I can't find the sound bites on the tapes. I can't, and I just had this once again a couple of weeks ago. And so I texted MC and I thought, this is very strange that I have this, and I never get to a conclusion. I don't know that I hit the set and I didn't have anything available and was at a loss for words and no tapes edited, or I was able to pull it off. It always ends before I get to but the weather's on the air and they're going to break and I've got nothing done. I've got no tapes, I've got nothing. I don't even have a suit, I've got nothing. And it's just, I also texted Derek Rogers about that. And he said, he reminded me of an incident that I forgot. I would do live shows out at Duty Noble on a regular basis because it was just fun. It was like, I don't have to produce a show today, basically. I just grab the players and the coach after the game and I talk and we'll roll some highlights and I'll get a few news off the news items off the wire and I'll ad-lib the whole thing. And hey, I can sit and watch baseball and tape the game. But on this particular day, we were having issues with the microwave truck. So I was kind of caught at around 5 o'clock in that. They're working on it. Do I wait? Are they going to get it fixed? Or do I make a mad dash back to the station and try to throw together a sportscast? Well, push came to shove. I ended up hauling it like 95 miles an hour down route. Help me out. Between 82 between Starkville and Columbus. And I made it back, but I had the polo shirt. I had nothing prepared. I just talked and rolled a few first and second inning highlights and pretty much just ad-libbed the whole sportscast. And then I got the ultimatum after that. Mark, you ever do that again, you have to have a backup sportscast ready for us to read here from the studio. You cannot do this again. So.
When you think of editing now, for those that did tape to tape, how bad are you about the easiness of being able to get something in 20 minutes of video on air? Like, let's say you get back at 4:45, you got to produce a 5 o'clock show. You can do that with Adobe Premiere now, but with tape to tape, that wasn't possible, right?
And Chris and Will definitely be able to relate to this, and maybe some of you, I don't know at what point those transitions were made to digital, but I'm now thinking of Wednesday night SEC basketball nights, because everybody would play on Wednesday night and then the news conferences would feed after the highlights. So let's say Chris and I would go to one game. Maybe I did my sportscast live from the hump at 6 o'clock, and then I'd stay for the first half and then I'd hightail it back, and maybe Chris would do a live shot from the state game. So that was taken care of, but I had Ole Miss, I had Alabama, and anything else I wanted to hit from the SEC. And I was always insane when it came to, I want to cram in like a bunch of national highlights too. And I want to get all these SEC games. And I would always be calling all sorts of folks on an SEC baseball Friday night. Can I get that LSU Florida feed? Can I get that Tennessee Vandy feed? Stuff that didn't really matter, but I would try to cram it into the show. So those Wednesday nights were difficult because you'd hit the air at like 10:20. They would feed starting at 9:45. So from 9:45 to 10 would be the full highlight reel plus the post game, and you'd just be rotating tapes. You know, I got the highlights. Okay, I'm going to throw in the, and just be juggling the highlights and the post game feed and trying to make it all happen. So those were a whole lot of fun. For as nervous as I would be, to a certain extent, I'm pretty laid back individual. So I love the adrenaline of trying to throw together a show for 10 o'clock with all the games going on.
See, I came in kind of at a transitional period in terms of technology, because they were trying to go all digital with stuff towards the end of 06. So there was some tape, there was some, and I honestly, I still can't believe we did this. One of the ways we would get like stuff from Pathfire or News Source or whatever was we had a DVD recorder, and we would have to get a blank DVD and record it onto DVD, and then we'd have to take it into the edit booth and then pull it off the DVD like we would have taped. So we were still getting stuff off of tapes, and we were still having to capture live off of DVDs, but then editing it in Premiere and sending it to something called the library, which worked maybe 40% of the time. And I always had this recurring nightmare of the library crashing during the end zone. And it happened a couple of times. And then, of course, there were a couple of times where the library would work great, but we had so many rain delays that no games actually happened, and we had to fill an hour show, which was always fun. But yeah, the technology, so to speak, in the mid to late 2000s was not great. I almost would have rather we had been completely linear at that point, because at least then I knew what was happening.
I think Mark had to take off. He told me earlier he had a meeting set up at 2:40. So if he's gone from you guys' screens, we're all Zoom in. So I just had one more question anyway. Obviously, everyone kind of transcends a different time of TV. And, whether it was the 90s, the early 2000s, mid 2000s, me and Robbie more toward the present time. But a lot of the stories and stuff remain the same, and the skill sets remain the same. So a lot of people from the outside want to do TV. They want to get into sports, things like that. What would be your one piece of advice for someone who wanted to get into this and make it a career? And we'll start with Chris.
I would say just, understand the time commitments and the weekend commitments that it takes, because somebody mentioned SEC baseball, and it caused me to think about one of the things my wife would always grumble about, because, one of our baseball teams would always be good. So we would spend a week in Hoover at the SEC baseball tournament. Then we would spend about 4 days at a regional somewhere, 4 days at a super regional somewhere, and then go to Omaha. And you guys know you play every other day at Omaha, so that's a week-long proposition. So in the spring, we're really gone about 5 weeks from about May 1 all the way through June something. And so people just need to understand that that's part of it. You got to love it. Tom, I wanted to say one thing before we wrapped up, and that is just acknowledge that, Will Kohlmeyer is the godfather of SEC Sportscasters in North Mississippi. And Mark and I got up pretty much every day trying to catch Will, because we knew if we could chin that bar, if we could just kind of do half of what Will was doing, we were doing all right. So it was so fun to compete against him. He was so nice to us. He took us under his wing. We were rivals, but we were friends. And I just wanted to say that.
Wow. I really appreciate you saying that, Chris, because you're right. We competed against each other at 5, 6, and 10, but, when we weren't competing on that air at that time, we were all kind of in it together. So I totally get that. I appreciate those kind words.
Will, what would be a piece of advice you would give to someone that is trying to do this as a career?
Well, I'll echo what Chris was saying. The time is incredible. And that's why when you were introducing me at the beginning, why I got out of it. In fact, it was really a special time, biggest day ever for me when we had our child. And he came a couple months early, so everything was kind of changing. I was down in Columbus, My son was in the NICU unit in Tupelo. My wife was from Pontotoc, so we were all in 3 different places. And the people from WCBI, you know, the Jerry Joneses, the Derek Rogers, Bobby Berry, all those folks were so accommodating and said, hey, you just find a store wherever, do your sports, and then that way out. And I did a lot of stories up in Tupelo to see Colin there in the NICU. And so, like Chris, I wanted to make sure I got that out there. I appreciated the WCBA family and how they took care of me and my family. But I think the time is incredible. Don't expect to make, you know, people will see the stories, especially nowadays on social media, what these different sportscasters are making nationally. You know, you can't just go from college and start calling games like Brad Nessler, the SEC football game of the week. So, you know, you got to pay your dues. And so I think those are some things you got to be committed. There are some sacrifices, but obviously just listen to everybody today. So many rewards. We're blessed to have this opportunity to be a TV sportscaster and to cover some of these athletes and to deal with these coaches and fans is very special. So you got to weigh it all out, and I would do it all over again. Absolutely, 100%.
Derek, what about you? I know obviously an interesting thing for you, Derek, that I want to ask about, like the creative side. You know, obviously you went from WCBI to Hail State Productions and did, I mean, I still go back and watch some of those Final Four videos that you produced back with Mississippi State women's basketball. You know, what would maybe be some of the advice that you would give someone that maybe want to do something like this for a living?
I think you kind of have to fall in love with everything. And, you know, I wanted, since I was a kid, to be on television, but it was that broad. Like, I wanted to be on television. I didn't know I wanted to do all this other stuff. Like, when I started working in TV, when I started interning, when I started doing stuff like that, I found that I liked shooting. And then once nonlinear editing became a thing, I figured out that I liked doing that. I found the more that I learned and the more that I listened to, it may not sound like it means much right then, but it's going to come up somewhere. And so that was one thing that I did. I didn't pigeonhole myself. I didn't say, well, I'm only going to anchor and I'm only going to do this and I'm only going to do this. No, you can't do that, especially when you're in local TV. You have to fall in love with the local side of it. Yeah, you have 3 SEC schools. You will occasionally get to do national stuff, and you need to, but you have to do the local stuff. The high schools have to be your focus. And if you do all of that, then you'll be successful. You'll get to where you want to go. But the other thing is don't be afraid of your creativity. And I know a lot of people, especially around my time, they're creative people, but they just weren't willing to push it on air. And I did. I wanted to see how far something could go. I was also willing to fail. I was willing to do something and go, you know what? That didn't hit. It's okay. We'll try something else. But I was willing to do that. Robbie did the exact same thing. You know, Robbie kind of picked up on what I did, especially with End Zone, and then he took it in his own way, and then the End Zone became what it is now. It takes some guts to do that. Like, you have to be okay with going, you know what? I love doing this. I'm excited about it. Here's how we're going to do it. And not be afraid of the reaction to it. Because especially now, you can hear everyone at any given time because of social media, and you have to tune all of that out. So really, all of that to say, you have to fall in love with, to quote Nick Saban, the process. Because that's what this all is. If you really want to do it and you want to be successful, is that you have to love every part of it.
Going off that, Robbie, you obviously in a way teach this now with in Louisville and with the broadcast journalism and speech class. What's maybe something that you always, for someone that's interested in this, maybe what's one of the biggest advice you always give maybe a student out there?
Yeah, I think building off of what everyone else has said, the time commitment is significant. I mean, I brought up the story with Hugh Freeze sitting on the train. I mean, if you commit yourself to working in local television, especially working in local sports, you're never off. You're always working 24/7. You are constantly on, whether it's social media. Maybe you get a story from someone, from a local high school coach that you got to report on. Like you're never not engaged. I mean, I remember when I still do this. I wake up in the morning and I check Twitter. There's no reason for me to do it anymore because I'm not working at WCBI, because I don't have to follow all the reports, but it's almost like it's a reflex at this point. So it's the biggest thing is the time commitment, because you have to constantly be on. And that's why you and I worked so well together, is because we really understood that. I've worked with people in the past in sports that didn't really fully understand that, to be a great sportscaster in this area, you have to always be on. You can't take time off weeks on end, or you can't turn off once you're done with your 6 and you don't have to do a 10, like you're done. Like you can't be talked to until then. Like you can't do that. Like Derek understands that completely as well, is that you can never be off in this day and age, especially with social media. So that's the biggest thing. And the other thing is, and Derek mentioned a little bit as well, is really just encouraging experimentation. I mean, the point of working in Market 133 is to take chances and see if they work. You are going to make mistakes working in local TV. I know I've made plenty of mistakes in my 7 years working in local TV sports, and I really grew from them. Whether it was, following a source that didn't really give me correct information, or maybe I messed up a name on a highlight that I couldn't get over, or I really made an Ole Miss fan really mad this one time comparing Oak Hill Academy's football team to their football team. He lost his mind on me, left me a 3-minute voice message, and was threatening to sue me for it. So it was like those kinds of moments where you kind of got to, roll with the punches. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Encourage experimentation. That's what I do with my kids in the classroom. If you make mistakes, you will ultimately learn what really works and what really sticks. I know Derek laid a great foundation for me to build on with the End Zone, and that really helped me grow as not only as a person, but as a sports reporter and an anchor and an editor and a producer, because he laid that groundwork where I could really experiment and take chances and really build the End Zone into what it is today.
Speaking of time commitment, thank you all so much for taking time out of your days.
The king of segues, look at that.
Hey, Tom, one other thing. And Robbie, you forgot to mention this when you talked about the things that you got to cover and all of the teams and the winning and stuff. You forgot about the start of this dynasty.
Oh my gosh. By the way, the other sports story that I didn't mention that really shook me to my core was Buddy Stevens going after that official, because I was working with you at the time at EMCC, and I was the only person that actually had that on video as it happened. That
was after me. I was already.
Was that after you? Okay, it was after you. I
was working for the film crew, but I was gone that day because State was playing at Auburn.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that was after me. I left CBI literally the summer that the dynasty started, because they won a national championship that fall.
Right.
Yeah, I missed that whole thing.
You're lucky you did, because the firestorm that came down upon me, because I was the first one to kind of report on what happened, because I was the only one that was actually standing next to Buddy as it happened. So I could tell you what happened, what was said, what transpired, how it blew up, because I saw it through my lens and I could tell everyone exactly what happened. And then I had to tell everyone basically, it's not my video. I had to turn it over to EMCC, so I couldn't run it that night in sports. People thought I had lost my mind. But I was like, I'm just doing my job. That's what I was supposed to do at EMCC. But that was whole another story that came down from all of that. Yeah. But again, the golden age, 7 years between State also going to an Orange Bowl, Ole Miss going to a Sugar Bowl, multiple College World Series, national championship games. I mean, Mississippi State has yet to win a national championship in a team sport, but I've witnessed 3 times them playing a national championship game in 7 years. So it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. I was hoping I was going to be at WCBI when it happened, but, it's going to happen sooner rather than later. You just kind of got to accept it.
Tom, one thing before we close out, I just wanted to speak about WCBI for a minute. and about what a gracious and forgiving environment it can be for young sportscasters, because most of us took these jobs right out of college. And I can speak for myself, where coming out, I had a lot of rough edges and still do, but more rough then than now. And WCBI lets you work out and work through those things. And like all of you said, it lets you try and fail. It lets you make mistakes. It lets you do stupid stuff and not get fired for it. So I've always been really appreciative of WCBI to help me be a better person, because they sure did.
Hey, Tom, one quick thing, one quick shout out, Tom, if I may, before we wrap it up. I know at the beginning we talked about what we all do currently. I want to give a shout out to my current employer so I don't get let go after this video is out there. I'm currently a vice president of marketing and community relations at Northeast Mississippi Community College. So I wanted to, at least, I had to get a little groundwork in there. I failed to mention that at the top.
Hey, it's all good. That's why we're here. It's why we keep just yet again, and of course, big thanks to Mark Rogers as well, taking time out of his day to come talk with us. And again, huge thanks to all of you for taking time out of your day to talk about this. Hopefully it makes us feel a little bit better in the sports list world that we're currently in right now. But maybe we could do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
Sounds great. It's a pleasure.
Tell MC we said hello.
Yes.
We'll do. Thank you. See y'all.
Thanks,
See
Tom.
y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.